Great. So, welcome everyone again to our workshop today on how to manage stress during pregnancy. My name's Kelsey Odgers, and I'm a clinical psychologist in the Psychology in Schools team, which is part of Norfolk and Suffolk NHS Foundation Trust. And I'll just hand over to my colleague to introduce herself.
Yes, I'm Beth Mosley and I'm a consultant clinical psychologist working in the same service as Kelsey.
Perfect. Thanks, Beth. And Beth and I will be taking you through the workshop today. We also just wanted to briefly acknowledge Zoe Buckle, who was previously our assistant psychologist in the team, for her contributions to the workshop. We also wanted to say to you all before we get started is we want to give you full permission to get up, move, go to the toilet and have a break. So as you know, this is being recorded, so you can really be safe in the knowledge that if you need to have a break, you need to move, you can, and you can then revisit the content at another time. I remember myself when I was pregnant, I definitely couldn't have sat down for 2 hours. So yeah, please do whatever you need to do. We also know that this could be an emotive topic for some people. So, again, if things just feel too difficult today, please know that you can revisit the recording. You'll Great. So, we just wanted to be really clear from the beginning of this workshop what our aims are, because we know that both thinking and talking about stress during pregnancy can be emotive or a sensitive topic for many of us. So, our aim really is to provide key information and messages from the latest research on stress during pregnancy. And our intention in doing this is not to create any additional stress or anxiety for anyone, because really that is the last thing we want to achieve from today. But instead, it's about providing you with the key information about stress during pregnancy, as we feel that you have the right to know this, so that you can really make those informed decisions about your own stress management to support both you and your baby if you are pregnant already. And we know that often we have little or sometimes even no control over certain stresses in our environment. And we know that stresses during pregnancy, which we'll come to, can actually increase. So, this workshop isn't about telling you to avoid stress altogether, because that's completely unrealistic and actually wouldn't be helpful. But we want to give you permission to prioritize stress management the same as you are prioritizing other things, such as nutrition during your pregnancy, to really make a difference to you and your baby. So we hope that you find it really useful in really thinking about new ways, or perhaps even a reminder of old ways to manage stress and really have a shared experience with other parents to be. Great. Okay. So what are we going to be covering today? What's the kind of overview? So we'll start by thinking, why does this matter? So I'll be talking you through some bits around that, and then thinking about some common stressors during pregnancy. We will then use the three emotion regulation systems model to help us think about stress management, and then consider ways to increase our stress system to break out of these stress cycles. And within this, we're going to also think about prioritizing the basics, because those things really can't be ignored. And then, although it's one of the final things we'll come to, the final section is around what evolution tells us about the importance of building our tribes. So this is all about support systems, and this really is the key message. So we know that we need to have those, that we need to have our tribe, we need to have those support systems when navigating both pregnancy and parenthood. So this really can't be underestimated. And then we're hoping to finish today with an audience Q&A. So if you've joined us on Slido, you'll get the chance to kind of keep note of any questions that you have, and we're hoping to either respond to them live in the workshop today, or we certainly will collate them and come to them in the follow-up email. So they will be answered either way. Great. Okay, so we have an open text Slido question now. How does stress impact you? And this can be anything at all. This can be, your thought process, your mind, your body, so if any physical sensations you might be feeling, and also your behavior. So what does stress perhaps make you do or not want to do, for example? So anything that comes to mind. Makes me short-tempered. Yes, that's definitely one that I can relate to as well. Yeah, and it's really common, isn't it? When we're feeling really full and really stressed and overwhelmed, your temper is likely to be much shorter. Yeah, so fatigue, it can be incredibly exhausting. I think particularly when we're pregnant as well, or during parenthood. Yeah, anxiety. So those two things are kind of very much linked, aren't they? We can have increased anxiety, and then that muscular tension. We can feel really tense, particularly perhaps in our shoulders, our necks, our chest can feel quite tight. Yeah, so zone out and it affects sleep. Yeah, so it can really affect our concentration. Yeah, other people saying the same thing about concentration. We can zone out in the day. And also it can impact us at night, can't it? Absolutely. Stress really does impact, yeah, those things. Anything else? Okay. So I think one last one came through just as it came through. But yeah, so yeah, it makes me snap at other people is what someone is saying. Okay. So, why does this matter? So, we know that stress is a normal human experience. It's something that all of us experience. And I'm really confident in saying I think every single human being can say that at one point in their life, probably multiple, they have been stressed. And during pregnancy, it's really normal for stress to increase. So, that's a really key message. So, when pregnant, your mind and body are doing really incredible things. So, not only are they growing a baby, which is just absolutely incredible, growing the placenta, so a whole new organ, and making changes to prepare you for parenthood as well. But these changes can put, of course, additional stress on us. Those physiological changes, changes in our brain, and how you feel emotionally and psychologically will impact our ability to cope and manage everyday and also chronic stress as well. And of course, the impact of all this will influence, how we cope with everyday life. And this is a really normal thing to happen. So, our bodies need rest when we're pregnant to help preserve energy for our growing baby and all the wonderful things our body's doing. Our brains are also working incredibly hard and they undergo really significant changes in the structure, again, helping us to prepare for parenthood, to help us be more attuned to our children's need and be more protective of our children. So it's really normal for those people that talked about increased anxiety, increased tension, for us to be more kind of hyper vigilant to stress because our brain is doing that to keep us and our babies safe. So if new feelings are coming up for you during pregnancy or feel more intense, or maybe, as people have said, they struggle with concentration, perhaps they're more forgetful, this is likely due to those brain changes. This is really normal, and there are biological reasons for this. So, stress, just to give it a definition, is where factors or stresses in our lives outweigh our ability to cope. So, we can see why, therefore, that if our mind and body, the demands on our mind and body are heightened, it will influence our ability to cope. And the problem with this is that both us and others around us, and actually more broadly society as well, can still put huge amount of pressures on us when we're pregnant. And we're often expected, especially in the early weeks of pregnancy, because it isn't always necessarily seen by other people, to function in the way that we did before we became pregnant. So this could be in different ways. This could be perhaps in our home life. Maybe we have other children to look after and the demands are still the same as they were before. Maybe in our work life as well. You maybe want to still perform highly and succeed in our careers. And also in our social lives as well. We still want to go out and do all of the things that we love doing as much as we ever did. But if we really take a step back and consider what I said about all of those changes that are happening, both in our bodies, our brains, psychologically, this isn't going to be realistic for anybody. So, the reason that all of this matters and why we're actually running this workshop is because it's about acknowledging this, to really take a step back and consider all what you're currently doing and why it might be more difficult to cope in the way that you were before. So, it's really to view stress in a very different way because we know that if we view stress negatively, this will increase the negative impact it has on us. So, if we think about stress being there to indicate to us that perhaps we might be doing too much, and that we need to adjust our expectations, or maybe to help other people adjust their expectations of us, so that we can do something to help ourselves or get support from others around us. Because, as we said, that tribe, that support system is going to be really key here. So, really seeing stress as highlighting to us that we need to do something different. And we really hope that that is what today is all about, to give you this key information, these key messages. And this is a really key message we want people to try and hold on to, but to really see stress management as important as other things that you're prioritizing. Okay, so please be kind to yourselves and remind yourself of what we just said, and actually let other people know this as much as you need to. And just remember all of those wonderful things that your brain and body are currently doing. Okay. So, relating to this, we're going to come to think about common stressors, but what factors are impacting your stress levels right now? This is an open text one. So write whatever comes to mind, and please write multiple ones as well if there are multiple factors that are impacting your stress levels, because my guess would be there probably are multiple things. Worries about the pregnancy going well and my baby being okay. Yes, so those health worries about us and our pregnancy, but also about baby are such common things. Any other things? Working with fatigue and nausea, yeah, planning maternity leave, finances, wanting baby to be happy and healthy, yeah. So someone else talking about baby's health and happiness. Absolutely, the pressures around work, finances, planning maternity leave can be, huge. And really managing those pregnancy symptoms as well. We know things like fatigue and nausea are so common, but we're kind of expected, aren't we, sometimes just to carry on. Yeah, juggling other children, partner, and work. So really managing sort of broader relationships with other people, looking after children can be much more tricky when we're pregnant for lots of different reasons. Yeah, relationships. So relationships are, it can be so broad and they can have impact in different ways on our stress levels. Lots of information online. It's quite overwhelming. Yeah. So certainly when I was pregnant, this was a huge one for me. I think there's so much out there, so much conflicted information, and it's so difficult, I think about where should we know who should I listen to, or what should I read or do or follow. Extra tests and scans, absolutely. There's so much more focus on our health, isn't there, and our baby's health when we're pregnant, and the pressure to not be stressed. Yeah, absolutely. Which is why we kind of wanted to think about why this matters at the beginning, because actually this can itself be quite stressful. Yeah, and previous pregnancy experiences. Yes, we want to acknowledge that people are on different points of their journeys, as we saw in those initial slidos, in terms of, whether this is first pregnancy or not, can have a really big impact on our stress. So thank you all for sharing those. So this is quite a long slide. It covers a lot of different areas. So we won't be able to go into loads of detail about each of those, and certainly many of them have already been highlighted on the Slido. So thank you again for sharing those. But we really just wanted to just take a pause here and say, these are just some. There's going to be so many more that we couldn't cover. But just to say, look how common these things are. So if you're experiencing these, some of these, my guess is that everyone is experiencing at least, multiple ones here. You're not alone. And I can certainly relate to many of these myself from my own experience of pregnancy as well. So again, this isn't to overwhelm you, but to really help to kind of acknowledge and validate your experience, and again, really show that you're not alone. So these come from both the literature, the research, but also from, the co-production work we did when we talked to people who had experience of pregnancy. So we'll just go through them in turn. So worrying about getting things right, will I be a good parent? Will I, have I bought the right things? Have I prepared in the right way? There can be societal expectations and pressures around this too. So the kind of pressures to be the perfect parent. I think social media has a huge part to play in this. I remember seeing myself the kind of ideal nurseries all over social media, which can put a huge amount of pressure on us. There can be expectations around appearance, such as weight gain, and the kind of this narrative that, everyone needs to be glowing during pregnancy. And if you're really not feeling that, it can be really, really difficult and add a sense of pressure to us. The impact of relationships as well. And we touched on this in the Slido. And we know that research tells us that pregnancy and becoming a new parent can have a huge impact on the couple relationship in particular. So there can be increasing conflict, more feelings of disconnect as well. And for some, pregnancy can also be a factor in relationship breakdowns. And that can be incredibly stressful, of course. We talked about this a lot in the Slido, but worrying about health and worrying about baby's health. So we know that this is kind of a much more focus on this when we're pregnant, lots of scans, lots of tests, as people highlighted, which can really heighten these concerns. Perhaps also that you maybe have a higher risk pregnancy, for example, twins, and that can, of course, heighten stress levels as well. And people that maybe found out late as well. So worrying about what you did or perhaps didn't do in the early stages of pregnancy when you didn't know. And really related to this, your own health as well. So we've talked about the kind of more focus on our health when we're pregnant. We have lots of different blood tests and things like that as well. But also those pregnancy symptoms that someone talked about, fatigue, nausea, sickness, aches and pains. The impact on our sleep can be absolutely huge. And that's really kind of physically and emotionally taxing for us. And also thinking about our own health is mental health as well. So maybe you've struggled with your mental health before becoming pregnant, or actually being pregnant has exacerbated some of your mental health difficulties. So, this can be a really, really stressful time for us, especially with that added pressure, as someone highlighted, and not feeling stressful. So we know we just wanted to say here that expected parents suddenly stopping their medication more generally for their mental health, so it might be low mood or anxiety, can lead to increased stress levels. So it's really important that if this applies to you, to speak to your doctor before you come off any medication, okay? But also just remember what the things you did before becoming pregnant that helped your mental health, to really use those things again. Also, another common stressor is your relationship with the pregnancy. So we know that unintended pregnancy can often be linked to increased perinatal stress, and that can be for different reasons. And as we highlighted on the Slido, it might not be your first pregnancy, and that's going to, of course, influence your relationship with it, particularly if you've experienced perhaps a miscarriage or other difficulties in a previous pregnancy. Um, and worries such as, will I have an instant bond with my baby? Will I love them like I should? Are all very common. The impact of past trauma. So you may have had adverse or abusive experience of being parented yourself, or you may have experienced other traumas throughout your life, which with the pregnancy, your adjusting identity and those examinations that you might be having might be bringing certain things up for you. And of course, this will contribute to stress levels. Messages from professionals. So I've talked about this already, and those conflicts in the parenting advice. So there can be different messages from professionals that feel unhelpful. It can be sometimes black and white, sometimes it can feel shaming, or we can perhaps felt like we're being kept in the dark and not told things. So for me, like I felt like I was going into birth having not really spoken to anyone else apart from one close friend about what that was like. So just feeling like, certain things you're kept in the dark about. And really related to this kind of conflicts and parenting advice, and that can come from professionals. But as I said, there might be differences in terms of parenting books and things that, other things that are out there, but also generational differences. So it might be that a parent or a grandparent are sharing with you about some advice that which was really common for them, but it actually doesn't align with kind of your values or what's important to you, or with the current knowledge of what's known now. So this can be a source of stress for us. And linking to that, really worries about birth. So perhaps this is your first pregnancy, so it's perhaps a little bit of the fear of the unknown. And I think here, media and television can be so unhelpful, as can sometimes messages from other people, because it tends to be quite biased towards difficult experiences generally. Or perhaps you may have had a previous pregnancy and there might have been complications at birth. So naturally, you're going to be feeling more anxious or worried about that. The impact of neurodivergence. So we know that hormonal changes in pregnancy can heighten neurodivergent traits. So, for example, make ADHD more prominent. And pregnancy might be more difficult due to bodily and sensory hypersensitivities. So, this might also be impacting you, and it might also be impacting you in different ways too throughout pregnancy. Someone touched on this already, but financial concerns. So we know that expenses related to baby, but also the potential loss of income due to maternity leave can be financially stressful, especially in the current context of the cost of living crisis, as can work and social life changes. So really adjusting to new work demands, the maternity leave, and also changes in social situations. And that can be really stressful. I certainly found the whole thing around maternity leave incredibly stressful myself. External events, so there can be major life events, for example, moving, bereavements, or serious illness, or other things that are happening in your life which can impact stress levels. And finally, lack of social support. So we're going to really think about social support today. As I said, that's a really key message. But maybe if you're a single parent, or if your partner works away, for example, or works long hours, Maybe you don't have close family or friends nearby. This can absolutely be a source of concern and worry for you. And there's kind of a biological basis to this. It's really understandable and normal for us to feel worried and more stressed if we don't have that social support. And as we said, we're going to be really thinking about how to increase that social support and those systems in the second half of the workshop because it's really important. Thanks, Beth. Okay, so different types of stress. So there are two different types of stress. You've got acute stress, which is very much short-term stress that typically results from immediate stresses or challenging situations. And it's very much often linked to a sudden change. So the body's fight, fight, freeze response, which we're going to say more about in a second, leads to temporary physiological changes. Okay, and examples of acute stress could be a last minute change of an appointment. So maybe your antenatal appointment has suddenly changed, perhaps an argument with a friend, which is a one-off. A flat tire can be really stressful, and that's an acute stress. Or maybe there's a presentation coming up at work. So really kind of those things that come and go, those everyday stresses. So chronic stress, on the other hand, is when the stressor persists over an extended period. And prolonged exposure to chronic stress can lead to kind of cumulative psychological and physiological effects. And as I said, it's ongoing events in a person's life. So examples could be financial difficulties, mental or physical health difficulties, perhaps conflict in a relationship, maybe with a partner, which is ongoing. So it's those things which are much more long lasting without a really clear end. And that's the kind of distinction. So really thinking about the fight, flight, freeze response, which we'll go to next. Thanks, Beth. You may have heard this before. So this is the response that's evolved as it was really useful to us in those immediate situations. So essentially what happens is when we're stressed, our brain is experiencing something as potentially threatening to us. So our brain perceives something in our environment, or maybe it's a thought process that it sees as something potentially threatening to us, and then that triggers this fight, flight, freeze response. So really in response to that threat or perceived threat, there's a neurochemical surge of adrenaline. So it really pumps that adrenaline around our body, and we experience many physiological changes that you can see there on the slide. So things like butterflies in our stomach, a faster beating heart, more rapid breathing, feeling that tension that someone talked about. And essentially, the function of this response is to make our bodies stronger and faster to really survive that perceived threat. And the way that to survive is either fight, so we fight it away, flight, so we run away from it, or we freeze. So it's kind of what animals do, as you can see in the wild, sometimes pretend I'm not here and it hasn't seen me, don't make a sound. But we know that if stress is very high or prolonged, this can start to impact us emotionally and physically because the stress response doesn't switch off. And we know that when our fight, flight, freeze response has kicked in, just by acknowledging this to ourselves, telling our brains, oh, this is that response they were telling us about, that fight, flight, freeze response, and reminding ourselves that this is an absolutely physiological, normal response to have to stress, this can actually help to settle down that adrenaline and stop this response, really kick-starting our body's rest and digest system to help us to really calm and settle down. So just knowing that in itself can be a really helpful tip if your brain is perhaps sees something that isn't, perceives something as stressful when perhaps it isn't, just telling ourselves this can really help calm us down. So we just have another Slido question now. So are any of the below stressors a particular concern for you during pregnancy? So these are just multiple choice ones. So you can select as many as you like, just to get a sense of what are the kind of main sources of stress for people. Okay, so people talking about work performance, anxiety about the pregnancy, which we've touched on, and relationship difficulties, which again will look different for different people. Yeah, people selecting similar ones, which shows again that kind of shared experience. Yeah, financial worries, which again have come up on the Slido previously. Okay, great. Thank you, everybody. So again, that kind of shared experience. So what impact does stress have on you? Are there any particular things, having talked about this a bit more, thinking about that fight, flight, freeze response that kind of, comes up for you? Yeah, flight, someone saying. Yeah, so kind of that need to just sort of escape, avoidance, and wanting to escape is a really common and normal experience. Yeah, faster heartbeat, tension in my chest, so kind of those physiological changes. Other people talking about can't sleep and reduced appetite. Yeah, absolutely. So it can have such an impact, can't it, on those kind of everyday activities that we need to be able to do. And actually, when we're pregnant, that can be really tricky because we know that sleep and obviously, diet is so important, and that can then exacerbate the stress levels that we have. Catastrophic thoughts, yeah. So our thought process can really be impacted by stress. We kind of worry about the worst case scenario, terrible things happening, stop doing things I'm worried about. Yeah, so again, that avoidance, that flight maybe, and headache. Yeah, so that kind of real tension headache that we can often get when we're feeling stressed. Yeah, and can't think. So just really hard to have a clear sense of kind of thought process, perhaps some brain fog, which can feel really tricky. Okay, so I think a lot of the things have already been named here, so I won't say loads about this slide, but I guess what we're trying to do is just show that stress can have an impact on so many areas of our life. That emotional impact, so people have talked a lot about anxiety, feeling on edge, feeling afraid, but it also can make us feel low, lonely. We can feel shame and guilt about that too. So it can have a real kind of, yeah, far-reaching impact on us emotionally. Physical impact, again, we've talked about this a lot, but it's those common things that we see in the fight, flight, freeze responses, but also those impacts, I guess, on eating and sleeping, as other people have already highlighted. So it can, just such a profound impact. The behavioral impact of stress as well. So people have talked about, those the unable to concentrate, unable to kind of make clear decisions. It can be hard to remember things. Also being snappier with others. And again, that can impact sort of those relational stresses as well that we touched upon. We can feel restless, so it can be maybe difficult to sit still, or maybe the opposite. Or we can also withdraw from other people around us. And again, we're going to talk so much about the importance of other people in that support system. So it's really tricky that if that's kind of what happens to us when we're feeling stress, at the time we need people most, we're kind of withdrawing from them, it can make things really hard for us. And also the cognitive impacts of stress. So people have touched on this, but kind of those racing thoughts or not being able to have a clear thought process, those catastrophic thoughts, really, really worrying about what if, putting high expectations on ourselves. And within this, we can make a lot of judgments. So particularly when we're pregnant, it can be, why can't I cope like other people? That comparison, will I be able to cope? Will I not be a good parent? Or I am a rubbish parent already? We can have those self-critical thoughts. So stress can have such a far-reaching impact on all of us. So if you're experiencing these things, you're certainly not alone. Okay, before I hand over to Beth, who's going to think with you about strategies, to reduce stress during pregnancy, we want to introduce you to the three emotion regulation systems model. And this is to help us understand what might be happening at a psychological level when we start to experience stress during pregnancy. So this comes from compassion focused therapy developed by a psychologist called Dr. Paul Gilbert, who's done some wonderful work. And we're going to be signposting you to other resources in this area. So we know that the brain is the body's most complex organ. So its job is to continuously balance physiological and psychological needs, whilst also responding to the environment and ultimately keeping us safe. So to achieve this, it needs to find a balance between three systems. So there's the threat system, the drive system, and the soothing system. So you can see those three things on the screen there. So I'm going to talk about each of these in turn and think about how they apply really to pregnancy. So we've firstly got the threat system. So this is the system in our brain that aims to protect us and keep us safe. So millions of years ago, this system would have been incredibly adaptive for us ancestors, okay? Because we know, for example, our ancestors traveled across different planes and they would have encountered different predators, yeah? So when this happened, their threat system would have activated due to a perceived threat being identified. So perhaps they saw something in their environment that kind of triggered their threat system. Okay, so this would have then triggered that physiological change in our body, leading to that fight, flight, freeze response that I mentioned earlier. And that would have given us the best physical chance to kind of overcome or get away from that threat. So, a really good system, a really important system, of course, for all of us to have. But there are times when perceived threats may not actually be threats, especially in our modern society. So, for example, even the way that we talk to ourselves can really trigger our threat system, like self-criticism that I talked about earlier. For example, I'm going to be a rubbish parent, but also those catastrophic thoughts that someone talked about. Just having those thoughts about the worst case scenario can trigger this system. It can create a sense of threat to us, perhaps about our parenting abilities or something else. But there may actually be no evidence that that is the case. So, when this happens, our threat system can overwhelm us and lead us feeling fearful, angry, anxious, stressed, all of those things that we've talked about. And when we're pregnant, fears of birth, about coping with our pregnancy and parenting, anxiety about our baby's health or keeping baby safe, gender disappointment, trauma symptoms, relationship conflicts, all of those things that we've said we might see in that threat system, okay, when we're pregnant. So we'll come to the drive system now. So this is a system that drives us towards the things that we need, that we want or need to prosper. And it's really responsible for the rushes of pleasure that we get. So that dopamine hit that people talk about, that follows when we've achieved a goal or something we really want. And this can be really powerfully motivating and can really narrow our attention to really focus on those goals that we want to pursue. So, again, a really important system to have. We need to have that get up and go, that drive, that motivation system. But again, it can become tricky, especially when we're kind of in the blind pursuit of goals, and that's actually causing us more harm, maybe to ourselves or other people. So, for example, trying to do everything that we were pre-pregnancy whilst we're pregnant can end up becoming really problematic if we're exhausted, for example, or overwhelmed. So everyday life, when we think about the threat and the drive system, tend to stimulate these two systems. So sometimes we can even use the drive system to effectively manage threat. So for example, we might push ourselves to try and be a perfect parent, to get all the perfect things ready for our baby, to create the perfect nursery and read all of those endless parenting books if we're worried about not being a good parent, which is a perceived threat. But then people can get stuck oscillating between the threat and the drive systems. And this is called the threat drive loop. So, an example of this is that parents thinking, I'm not good enough, I'll never be good enough, I'm a failure. And they may utilize their drive system in unbalanced ways to feel good about themselves or to distract from or to avoid the threat, which can lead to problems. Okay. So, this is about trying to do more, trying to read more, trying to have more. And again, this can just increase our stress levels and put us back into threat. So this is really problematic, as we can hopefully see. And it might be something that you're identifying with as I'm talking. It was certainly something that I identify with when I was pregnant. So we now come to the soothe system. So this is the system responsible for feelings of safeness, contentment, and calm. So if the drive system is the doing system, the soothing system is the being system. Okay, it's all about slowing down, finding safeness and connection so we can re-establish a calm state within ourselves. So if the threat and the drive system are activating us, the soothing system can deactivate us. Okay. And this allows us to soothe ourselves and it also allows us to soothe other people. So it's linked with experiences of giving and receiving care, affection, kindness, warmth, encouragement, and support. And these behaviors can really downregulate and weaken the toxic effects of the threat system. So, in this way, the soothing system can bring us calm, safety, and peace as well. So during pregnancy, a typical pattern with the three systems might emerge. So we can have an overactive threat system, time spent in the drive system to try and escape this, so that loop that I talked about, and then a relatively smaller soothe system. So these three systems end up completely out of balance. And another thing to add here is that things that we tend to try and use to soothe ourselves tend to become undermined when we have a baby and during pregnancy as well. So as well as our threat system increasing during pregnancy, as we talked about, our soothing system generally decreases. So for example, as some of you have said, sleep becomes more problematic, our routine, which gives us containment, changes, and also general self-care becomes more tricky. Okay, so we'll come back to this model, and Beth's going to think more about this, thinking about how can we activate that soothe system to really increase it and really balance things up a bit to help us manage stress during pregnancy. Okay, so with that said, I'm going to hand over to Beth now, who's going to do just that. Thanks, Beth.
Thank you, Kelsey. So we're aware that stress experienced during pregnancy is situated in a wider context that we don't have full control over. But there may be some things that we can do that can help us top up our resources so there is less of that discrepancy between stressors and resources to cope. We're going to be going through some ideas, and you may resonate with some more than others. So take what you think will be helpful, as we know, everyone is different. So we're going to be presenting some ideas that can be less intensive in terms of time and could be used creatively. So after discussing these key ideas with you, we're going to think with you about the importance of your support systems and building your tribe, which is really fundamental to breaking that cycle of stress. And we should be able to do those alongside some of these other things that we're talking about. So, in the first instance, we're thinking about helping make sense, taking a step back and making sense of why we feel a certain way can be really helpful rather than immediately trying to fix it or fix the problem. And we've already explored the many reasons where you may be in a position with increased stress. And hopefully, from this workshop today, you can recognize that those feelings are completely understandable. When we make those links of where our stress may be coming from, we can then better identify what we may need to do to support our system. It can be really easy to blame ourselves and compare ourselves to others. For example, I shouldn't feel this way. And it's important to acknowledge there isn't a right way to feel, and no one's circumstances will be exactly the same. So comparisons are often not helpful. It can also be useful to remember that the feelings that we experience signpost us to what's important. So it can be automatic to push those tricky feelings down. But perhaps if these feelings are coming up, it can actually be helpful to notice why they're there and what the meaning is underlying it. Often those things come up because there's something that really matters. For example, you may be feeling worried about not preparing in the best way for your baby's arrival, and this may show the love you have for them already, but also the resources that you may need to allocate to preparing for that arrival. And meaning you might need to let other things go. So the way we make sense of our distress can be quite powerful for how consuming it is. In the first half, we made reference to the three emotion systems, the threat, drive, and soothing system. We mentioned that the threat and drive system may be being activated more, and we can get stuck in that threat drive loop. So it can be helpful to activate the soothe system, which helps us to feel safe, content, and calm, and deactivate the threat or the drive systems to help us get unstuck from that loop. If we think about how we might soothe our child's threat and distress, or someone else we may care about, do we ask them to work harder or go and achieve more in their time of need? The answer is probably not. Instead, we're more likely to try to offer soothing through care. So we need to try and do this for ourselves too, which we know can be really, really difficult. I know it's one of the biggest challenges I find as an individual, both when I was pregnant and since. However, the soothe system can be activated in lots of different ways, and the ways that activate the soothe system will be different for everybody. Soothe system can be activated by helping our minds and bodies slow down to allow for rest and digest. So some examples of different things, holding in mind that some things will work for you and others won't work as well. So connecting to the present moment, and we're going to do some breathing and grounding exercises in a minute, can be really helpful when our brains get caught up in the past or the future. Meaningful social connections, so that's time with our friends or family or pets. Those people can help us feel calm, relaxed, and understood. And physical touch and movement. So, moving around the garden, walking, exercise like yoga, and actually just having physical touch from people that we care about. So, these are things we don't necessarily need to carve out discrete time for, but can be woven into our life. And I know that's a challenge because our lives tend to be so busy. But it's thinking about those small bits of the day that we can bring those special soothing things in. So have a think about what helps to activate your soothe system, what you already know before I actually share some more practical ideas for you. Um, what do you do already? What do you know is really helpful in activating your soothing system? What helps you feel calm, relaxed, happy, or connected? So spending time with friends, absolutely. And sometimes it's the right friends for different vibes. So some friends are great for relaxing and chilling, and some friends are great for having fun and distracting you from some of your worries. And I guess during pregnancy, some of your friendship groups might evolve and change as you maybe link in with other groups of parent to be. So meditating, we're going to talk about meditation in a minute, listening to rain sounds. That's one of the things that my son currently listens to every night and has done for years to help him go to sleep. And I find it really soothing too. Being with your child and just trying to be present, having a bath. A bath seems to be a popular one. So, and going on a walk. So we know that physical activity and access to green spaces are really, really important for activating the soothe system. And yes, being able to listen to an audio book or a podcast or even listening to music or the radio can be really soothing for some people. Being outside, and I guess this time of year is more tricky, isn't it, for spending time in the garden as we're going into winter, but that can be really therapeutic as well. So thank you for your ideas. So what we're going to do now is we're going to have a look at some of the things that we know the evidence shows actually support the activation of the soothing system. So studies have shown that slow, conscious breathing reduces stress and improves overall well-being during pregnancy. And you may wonder, why does breathing work? Um, and as we've discussed, stress impacts the physiological system. And when we're stressed, it's very normal for our breathing to become faster and or shallower. So by tuning into the breath and slowing it down, we can actually control the nervous system and help the body to relax. This isn't something that happens necessarily overnight. So quite often, especially if we're used to breathing quite quickly and shallowly, we need to practice it and use it regularly. So we're going to practice a very brief exercise right now. You can choose to engage with, and then you'll know whether this is helpful or not. So if you just take a moment to embody a grounded, confident, and upright posture with your feet on the floor, shoulders width. I'm going to do this while I'm doing it with you. Your spine upright and shoulders slightly back, chest open, and you may wish to close your eyes or fix your gaze on something. When you feel ready, bring your attention to your breathing in a mindful way. Notice the sensations that are present as you breathe in and out. And when your attention becomes distracted, bring it back to focus on your breath in a gentle and kind way. Now, as you're gently holding your attention in the flow of your breath, see if you can find a soothing or calming breathing rhythm. Take some time to experiment with this, to explore what your breathing rhythm would be like if it had a soothing or calming quality to it. It may be that this rhythm is a slower and deeper rhythm than usual, but one that feels comfortable to your body. If you can, just try to breathe in a smooth, even way. If you notice your attention moving away from your breath or that you become distracted in any way, Gently bring your attention back to your breath and tune back into the calming or soothing quality of your breathing rhythm. As you continue, see if you can imagine a sense of slowing down in your body as you breathe out. It can also be helpful to notice your body feeling a little heavier as you breathe out, whilst your legs are supported by the chair and feet grounded on the floor. Continue practicing this breathing rhythm for a few more seconds or so, mindfully noticing when your awareness is distracted from this focus and gently bringing your attention back to rest in the flow of your soothing breathing rhythm. When you feel ready, open your eyes and bring yourself back into the room. So hopefully that was a helpful sense of how a couple of minutes of just focusing on the breath, slowing yourself down, can actually help your body and mind feel grounded. Quite often, practicing this breathing in the evenings or at bedtime can be really helpful in terms of building into a routine so that it becomes more natural in a scenario where you might already be feeling stressed. Because I think one of the things we know about breathing is it's really hard in that stressed moment to slow your breathing down. So practicing breathing when you're not stressed in that slow, calm way can give your body that training so that when you're in the more stressful situations, whether that's with your other children, if you have them, or at work, you can then come back to being aware of your breath and slowing it down. We've included resources and more information about breathing and audios or apps you can use to guide you in the resource pack. And we're also going to signpost you some resources around hypnobirthing, which we don't have time to discuss in any detail today, but you might be interested in finding out more about. As we said, this breathing can be really helpful for some people, but it does need that additional practice to work out what rhythm feels most comfortable to you. We've also included a link to the website where the recording of the script was found, and some other resources from compassion focused therapy. So you'll get that in your resource pack. So as we mentioned earlier, self-critical narratives and judgments about ourselves can arise when we're pregnant and when we become parents, which can really exacerbate an already stressful experience. We often have unrealistic expectations of ourselves and we can get stuck in a self-critical voice, which means we're pretty hard on ourselves. We know that that criticism that comes from others can over time be internalized, so we then become critical to ourselves. So it can be really helpful to monitor when we're using that self-critical narrative or making those negative judgments about ourselves and start to reframe this by using more compassionate words and narratives about ourselves. There are two ways to practice this, including building our compassionate voice and writing a compassionate letter, which we're going to go through now. So we're going to go through some steps of how to build a more compassionate voice, and I have had to practice this over my whole adulthood. So I will use an example. So notice the self-critical voice, what it's saying, what is the tone of voice, what are you feeling? So I've not done enough to prepare for my baby. I should do more. The voice is harsh, blunt, and angry. Imagine what you would say to a good friend who is thinking and feeling this way. Imagine what a good friend would say to you. It might be, I see how you're constantly trying to learn more and prepare more for your baby. Doing this constantly can be really hard work and tiring. Remember, everything you're already doing and have done is enough for both you and your baby. It's okay for some days to feel harder than others. Getting through the day is an achievement, especially when your mind and body are going through all of these changes. Imagine ways of viewing the situation that may be kinder or more helpful to you, such as, I'm doing what I can for my baby within my means, and I'll always want what's best for them. Others are also available to help support me and my baby when they arrive, whether it's family, friends, healthcare professionals, support groups. I'm not alone. Bring to mind something you're proud of or have achieved that day, no matter how small it may seem, such as spoke to a friend on the phone for 10 minutes, I ate lunch, I attended my midwife appointment today. So, really celebrating those small wins, which can be really big achievements in the context of what else you're juggling in your body and your mind. And then you can also find and engage in a self-soothing activity. So you can do something very deliberately that you know will be self-soothing, such as soothing breathing or grounding. So the other grounding technique is a 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 technique. And this is a really helpful exercise to do. You can do it without other people necessarily noticing you're doing it. So it might be a useful thing to do if you're out and about and you're feeling overwhelmed. It's a way of sort of helping you get out of your mind, which can be spiraling out of control. So it brings the focus to the present moment and it involves engaging the five senses by first identifying 5 things you can see, then 4 things you can touch, 3 things you can hear, 2 things you can smell, and 1 thing you can taste. So essentially, what you're going to do is look 5 things you can see. So look around you, and you can do it with me now, and name 5 objects or details you can observe. And it's really helpful in your mind to almost describe them in quite a lot of detail, so that you're really focusing your attention. And then you can move to 4 things you can touch. So identifying 4 things you can physically feel. So one of the things I think can be helpful is thinking if you've got your feet on the ground, really noticing the feeling of your toes inside your socks or your tights or your slippers or whatever you might be in. Noticing the sensation of your bum on the seat or on the sofa, wherever you might be. And thinking about perhaps the texture of your clothes. 3 things you can hear. So paying attention to 3 distinct sounds in your environment. And sometimes when you're in a really quiet environment, you can tune in. You might hear the birds outside, a clock ticking, or the distant sound of voices. And these are information we're often screening out all of the time. So it's really helping you um, use those senses and distract them away from some of those um, thoughts, spiraling thoughts and physiological sensations that might be feeling overwhelming. And the last thing, well, not the last thing, sorry, the penultimate thing, 2 things you can smell. So noticing 2 different scents. And sometimes it can be really difficult to notice 2 different scents. So we often say, don't stress too much if you can only notice one. Perhaps just imagine something that you like the smell of, like freshly mown grass or chocolate, baking bread. And the last thing is 1 thing you can taste. So just really focusing on what's in your mouth right now, that kind of single taste sensation. Um, and again, if that's really difficult for you, sometimes we say, just imagine the taste of something you like that you like, so that you're kind of occupying that final sense. So that's a really helpful way of just bringing you into the present moment and helping break that cycle of getting stuck in your ruminating or catastrophizing thoughts. And the other thing, which are similar to the compassionate voice, but allow something more concrete to come back to you when using the compassionate voice, which can be really difficult. Writing a compassionate letter to read to yourselves at times when you're struggling can be really helpful. Um, so when things are feeling okay or not too bad, so you're feeling well enough resource to do it, it may be helpful to draft a letter that would be helpful to read when your stress is particularly high. So some tips for writing the letter are writing what it is you're finding difficult, maybe something related to pregnancy. It could be outside of the pregnancy, but you're finding more difficult to manage at that point in time. It could be worries about your baby, it could be something else. Take the stance of it, writing it as if you're writing this to a really cherished friend that you really love and respect and believe in. And then validate your experiences, or if you're imagining it's your friend, their experiences. So I'm really sorry you're going through this. I hope you know it's okay to feel this way. I hope you know others in your position experience. So you're kind of both validating and helping that person yourself feel that your experiences, to some extent, are very normal based on what you're going through. Provide other perspectives to the situation. So I'm wondering if you've thought about, because when we're feeling stressed, we can sometimes go down into that kind of spiraling negative thinking. And so just offering that different perspective can be really helpful. And also just reminding yourself of those self-soothing activities that can be really helpful to managing your well-being. So I'm wondering if it would be helpful to and do whatever that might be. So it might be going for a walk, get out into the garden, um, turn that audio book on, not go to that event that you've got in your diary, which is maybe just one too many things this week. So letting something go. And then just have that letter there. And sometimes people write it on their notes in their phone because we all probably live with our phone permanently on us. So you can take a photo of it if you like to write by hand, because some people really value being able to write a pen and paper. And then you've got that letter there for you to read through. And again, there's something very soothing about reading words and just the act of going from left to right, the rhythm of reading. So that's a really helpful tool. A concept that some people find helpful is the battery analogy based on energy accounting. So we can think about the energy we have as a rechargeable battery. We only have so much energy, and sometimes the stresses you may experience can drain this. It's crucial that we're able to recharge our batteries in order to reduce stress and improve well-being. So it can be helpful to think about your activities for the day and how many bars of energy are used for each activity. And again, this will vary hugely from person to person. So it has to be based on what's relevant for you rather than thinking about how other people in your life or around you might require energy. While someone else who's pregnant may only use 1 bar of energy getting ready in the morning, if you're suffering with pregnancy related symptoms such as nausea or vomiting or fatigue, or you're not well, or there might be something else going on, you may have used 2 to 3 or more bars. So the amount of bars that people use for different activities will really vary from person to person. So the number of bars you have on each day may also vary. You may not sleep well, for example, and this may already set you back 1 bar for that day. And poor sleep is often experienced during pregnancy. So, considering how many bars you have and accounting for all the activities that you need to do in a day can be helpful to acknowledge the amount you achieve. I think we often really don't appreciate just how fully we um, are doing so much in any single day or evening. So, this can really help adjust expectations and the pressure you may have on yourself. For example, allowing yourself to not do the washing up at night on a day which has a lot of other pressures can be hugely helpful. And I guess that's where it's really valuable to have that support network, because if you're not going to do the washing up that night, you're probably going to be worrying about having to do it in the morning unless you've got others around you who can support and help you. The energy battery can also um, can really support us to start thinking exactly about that. How do we enable others around us to perhaps help reduce the burden placed on us and use some of their energy that bars to support us? So it's really important for us to consider what can we do to replenish our energy battery, and some of the ideas we've discussed may be helpful to think about. So, whether that's quiet time, movement, connection, creative expression, so writing or playing music, for example, or even drawing and painting, and making space for moments of stillness, however small. And again, I think it goes back to just 2 minutes sometimes can be quite restorative. Um, so some parents or carers find it helpful to do things which feel safe and predictable for them. For example, watching their favorite show on repeat because it feels safe and it's something that helps regulate you. So it's really about understanding yourself, finding what restores your battery, and then doing that and prioritizing that as much as possible. And letting others know around you what that is so that they can also support you with that. So really, we're giving you today permission to slow down. And we know unattainable perfection is not going to be helpful for anyone. Reminding you that your brain and body are changing massively. There's a redirection of energy to support the development of your baby. So you're not going to be able to perform like you did before pregnancy. So this is really about resetting expectations and speaking to others, such as those supporting you or your employer, because at work, obviously, um, that can also have a big impact on your energy reserves. And that enables those around you to have more realistic expectations of you too, and not seeing this as a fail in any way, but seeing it as a sacred part in your life where slowing down is actually key. So, in taking this pause, let's consider what you can do to help recharge your batteries and not get so drained, remembering that you're human. So, what can you do to recharge your battery? What are the things that you think, whether they're smaller things or bigger things, that you can do to recharge your battery? I must say, because it's turning into autumn, the thing I look forward to every day, because my days are very busy, is watching a box set. Just knowing I've got an hour of watching a box set with a hot chocolate or something like that. So I can really see how that helps your body relax, especially if you know you love something, you're really enjoying it. So spending time with your closest friend. And sometimes it might not be you might not be able to see them, but you may well be able to have contact with them through a conversation or a WhatsApp uh, video call. Um, Going out, getting out, feeling not like you're trapped in the house. Um, yeah, just giving yourself permission to do some of those things, perhaps that uh, you really love but go on the back burner. Enjoying your food and cuddling up with pups. How cute. How lovely. And again, seeing friends. And we're going to be talking about the power of community and friendship as we go on. There's a couple more people typing, so I want to make sure they get their chance to share. For me, sometimes actually getting up and doing an activity, so feeling really lethargic, but actually going out into the garden and getting that fresh air and just being outside can sometimes help upregulate you to um feel yeah, kind of like you've got more energy. And hugs with my child, so that's lovely. So tuning in, noticing some of those positive things, so really paying attention to kind of joy in others. A lovely thing. Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing. And these ideas help everyone on the workshop to think about things and ideas that might be relevant to them too, that they can give a go. So the next section is a really about the importance of getting the basics right, because it won't be a surprise to you that sleep, nutrition, and physical activity are key to improving our well-being and reducing stress. However, these can be really tricky for all of us, and we know in pregnancy that these areas can feel even more tricky for us. As we're learning about what we can and can't eat, our bodies are changing, which can make physical activity feel more difficult, and sleep can become more problematic. So, we're going to cover these areas because we want to ensure we've given you the information you need to feel confident in making decisions regarding your own well-being and that of your babies moving forward. And our attention is not to create more stress. And of course, it's impossible for all of the basics to be right all of the time. But what we're trying to emphasize here is that even small changes in these areas can make a huge difference to your stress. So, we just want to give you permission to prioritize the basics, really. So the gut microbiome is something we want to talk about today. It's the community of microorganisms that live in your intestines. It plays a crucial role in various aspects of human health. There was actually a newspaper article quite recently. I can't remember which paper it was in, but we can add that potentially to the resource pack 'cause it had some novel ways um, to talk about how you can improve your gut microbiome. Um, and so it's crucial in terms of human health, including digestion, immune system function, and mental health. And it's an area with a lot more research coming out about the importance of it. And we know that stress during pregnancy is linked to alterations in gut microbiome, which can impact both yours and your baby's health. So, alterations in gut microbiome during pregnancy can alter the microbiome of your baby, which can be linked to your baby's health. Therefore, your nutrition during pregnancy can have a big impact on your stress and also your baby's development. Now, we've actually developed a workshop all about the importance of nutrition during pregnancy, including ways to improve your gut microbiome, which we are going to be sharing with you at the end of the workshop. It's next month. And we also wanted to make you aware of healthy starts. And if that you are 10 weeks pregnant or more, you may be entitled to buy healthy food and milk. And we've got to have that link um, in our resource pack. So there's more information that you can find out about this really interesting area. And the great thing about it is there are easy things you can do to improve your gut microbiome. So it goes without saying, sleep is crucial for physical and mental restoration. We know, for example, when you have less sleep, um, that the fight, flight, freeze response in your brain, that part of your brain is much more sensitive. We know sleep is important for memory consolidation and blood vessel repair, and it becomes even more important during pregnancy. So sleep, having enough of it can significantly reduce stress. So we know that improving your sleep quality can lead to decreased anxiety and decreased low mood and better overall well-being. We also know that during pregnancy, sleep patterns can be disrupted due to those physical and hormonal changes, and you might be experiencing some of those now. So, some common issues that you might be familiar with, fatigue and tiredness. I know that in my first trimester, I've never felt so tired ever before in my life. It's common to really feel tired during pregnancy, especially in that first trimester. Back pain. So, back pain can make it difficult to find a comfortable sleeping position. Leg cramps can occur at night and disrupt sleep. Restless leg syndrome is a common condition during pregnancy, which affects 1 in 5 people and can make sleep difficult. Heartburn is also common during pregnancy due to hormonal changes and increased pressure on the stomach. So, that can impact on sleep. Needing to go to the toilet, so frequent urination, which can disrupt sleep, especially in the later stages of pregnancy due to hormonal changes and more pressure on the bladder. Strange dreams, so vivid and unusual dreams are really common during pregnancy, and that can disrupt sleep. And insomnia can occur any point during pregnancy and can be related to physical, emotional, hormonal changes. So we're probably stressing you out just describing how many ways that your sleep can potentially change during pregnancy. So we're going to give you some top tips for better sleep. But remember, if you are experiencing those persistent sleep problems, please talk to your doctor just to rule out any underlying conditions and to explore other treatment options. But here are some of our top tips. So if you're tired during the day or struggling with sleep at night, then rest where you can and take naps. If you're working, can you speak to maybe your employer about more breaks in order to rest? And if you have other children, maybe considering if you have anyone else around who could support you to have more rest. Interestingly, I've got like a Fitbit, and if I have a really difficult night's sleep and it's the weekend and I have an opportunity for half an hour nap, I actually see my sleep score increase and see that it improves um, my kind of restfulness score. So having those short naps can actually really make a difference to your recovery and your sleep quality. If heartburn's an issue, avoid lying down immediately after eating and eat little and often. And again, you can speak to your doctor about antacids. You can also and should also speak to your doctor if you're experiencing restless leg syndrome or leg cramps, as they may be able to support you with some supplements. If frequent urination is an issue, then limiting fluids in the evening whilst you're ensuring you're staying hydrated throughout the day can be helpful. But again, speak to your doctor if it's a significant problem for you. So sleep on your side, particularly your left side, as this improves blood flow to the uterus and fetus. Back sleeping should be avoided, especially in the third trimester, but don't panic if you wake up on your back. Simply roll back on your side. So the position you fall asleep in is more important than the position that you wake up in. Pillows can help with discomfort, so you can use or be used as back support between your legs. And that could also help you with sleeping in the side position. There are pregnancy pillows as well. You've probably seen those on your social media feeds. Um, but normal pillows are fine. So consider your sleep space. So basic things such as lighting, temperature, and noise can have a huge impact on sleep. For most people, cool and dark is best, but figure out what works for you. You might need a blackout blind or white noise can help improve your sleep. And just thinking about your duvet and pillows and making sure that they're comfortable. They're things we can easily overlook, and we might not be so sensitive to those things when we are not pregnant, but the pregnancy might make those things actually affect us more, particularly around body temperature. Creating a relaxing bedtime routine, and some of you mentioned having a warm bath as being helpful for um, triggering your soothe response. So having a warm bath, not too warm, but and listening to music or reading. And again, those breathing techniques can be really helpful for people. Creating a routine that is your bedtime routine is really helpful for training your body to know that now is time for sleep and can help it make it easier to fall and stay asleep. Again, trying to be as consistent as you can with bed and wake up time can help regulate your body's sleep wake cycle. And this might be something you didn't struggle with prior to pregnancy, but is something that you're more sensitive to now you are pregnant. Limiting caffeine is also important to do potentially during pregnancy. I know it's one of the things I had to take out in my when I had my third pregnancy. And then screen time and stimulating activities, including strenuous exercise and heavy meals before bedtime, can also have an impact on sleep. And then just trying to stay active during the day so that you've got that opportunity for physical activity and exercise. So lots and lots of top tips. I hope that's not too overwhelming for you. So we've got a Slido question for you next. Can exercise be helpful during pregnancy? Okay, so one person's not sure. Someone thinking yes. So let's find out. So yes, it is recommended to continue or even start a gentle exercise program during pregnancy. And exercise guidelines recommend that expectant parents should exercise for 150 minutes a week at low to moderate intensity, as long as it's a circumstance where a healthcare professional hasn't advised against it. Well, it might be that before you're pregnant, you might not be doing 150 minutes a week. So this is something to aim for. It's been found that exercise during pregnancy can activate something called the parasympathetic nervous system, which is responsible for calming the body down after periods of stress. So that is what helps with that soothe response. So gentle exercise can be crucial in stress reduction during pregnancy, as well as improving both the physical and mental health for yourself and your baby. So activities such as swimming, yoga, and walking are some great examples of gentle exercise. Also, just to add that swimming and yoga are really great at helping with building in that breathing, which can help with that deep, slow breathing. So they're really doubly good in that respect. And in a recent review of many different studies exploring the physical, mental, and occupational effects of exercise on pregnant women, it was found that aquatic activities, including swimming and yoga, helped pregnant women toward the end of their pregnancies, where resistance training, dance, and aerobic exercises provided the most benefits during the first trimester. Um, and other studies have found in that review that any form of exercise for 30 minutes a day or every other day for 60 minutes have extensive beneficial results. Um, so researchers also found that exercise is even more beneficial, the more likely you're able to maintain it throughout the pregnancy if you can get others around you, such as friends, partners, and family involved too. So linking in and trying to do things with others can be really helpful. And I know lots of people who maybe joined a yoga class for pregnant women. That's where they might have met. I've got some really good friends actually 20 years later that met in a yoga class, and they've all just sent their children off to university. So I think that there are often places where you can meet new friends as well. So we've covered quite a lot there with nutrition, sleep, and physical activity, and potentially feel quite overwhelming. Have a think about just one small change that you could maybe make in relation to one of those three areas that you think is something you can take away from today. And it doesn't have to be a big change, it can be a really small change. And it's those small changes that often can make a big difference. Great. And yeah, on with regard to yoga routines, there's some great YouTube uh, yoga teachers which are free to access, and they often have 10-minute routines before sleep and probably will have ones for women who are in pregnancy as well. Um, and I think sometimes having a routine that's only a few minutes rather than a whole 60 minutes is you're more likely to be able to do it every day. And I think, yeah, I got my Aura ring. Whenever I do housework or anything in the garden, always gives me loads of extra kind of points for doing activity. So I didn't really understand just how much housework is actually the equivalent of exercise. Um, and it can then feel good for you, which is like you say, it can feel like it's achieving something as well as that rather than just being a boring chore. And maybe going to bed a bit earlier, building in a bit of a soothing routine at bedtime and really prioritizing that space so that even if you're not necessarily falling asleep earlier, you've got more of that time in that relaxed space. Great ideas. So this is the final section, which is probably the most important of the entire workshop. This is really about the importance of your support networks. And we're going to be exploring from an evolutionary perspective why it's so important for us to have our tribe, which is a group of people who can support us, possibly all in different ways, both during pregnancy and throughout parenthood. And you may well be building a new tribe as you go into this new part of your life. So, what does evolution tell us? Humans have lived as hunter-gatherers for more than 95% of our history. In contrast, we live in WEIRD. So, WEIRD is an acronym which stands for Western, Educated, Industrialized, Rich, Democratic Societies. Now, research by Dr. Annie Swanepoel and Dr. Nikhil Chowdhury suggests that challenges in relation to maternal health care and in child mental health can be understood by reflecting on how weird societies, or WEIRD, I'm going to have to say weird because it's really hard to say that acronym as an acronym, diverge from the hunter-gatherer lifestyle that human psychology may be adapted to. This is called evolutionary mismatch. So, this research can give us clues on why we have the difficulties we do living in westernized societies. So, parenting in hunter gatherer versus westernized societies is significantly different. Hunter gatherer infants receive continuous physical contact and more sensitive and responsive caregiving than is typical of westernized societies due to the extensive involvement of allo parents, that is, non parental caregivers, who generally provide 40 to 50% of their care. So, in their research, Dr. Annie and Nikhil found that half the time when a baby cried, someone other than the parent would step in, which could be anyone of 10 to 15 allo parents. So, can you imagine the difference having that kind of support available would make to so many parents? Humans are referred to as cooperative breeders because it is well established that extensive allo parenting, childcare provided by caregivers other than parents, has been at the heart of our success as a species. In contrast, parenting in weird societies puts a particularly heavy burden on parents, particularly mothers, who are generally providing most of the care to their babies. Intensive mothering narratives, the idea that mothers should be able to manage caretaking primarily alone using their maternal instincts, remain really pervasive and also can be problematic. Many people wrongly assume that primary caregivers, typically mothers in weird societies, carry out the majority of the care for their babies is the natural human way, except it isn't. We've evolved to expect support and help for our communities in childcare. It takes a village to raise a child. So the differences between weird and hunter-gatherer parenting practices may underpin many of the mental health difficulties that parents experience today. So guilt surrounding struggling to cope with child rearing is a frequent factor impacting on new parents' mental health, and the associated self-shame discourages them from seeking help. Lack of social support is one of the most well-established risk factors for postnatal depression. From this evolutionary perspective, struggling to cope is a predictable result of parents lacking the kind of support structures that they have been shaped to expect, rely upon, and need. We talked in the previous slide around the importance of it takes a village to raise a child, but it also takes a village to raise a parent. Every time a baby is born, so is a new parent. So, this message emphasizes that new parents need the support of their community or village to thrive and feel confident and supported, both during pregnancy and in their new role once baby arrives. Pregnancy and parenthood can be a very demanding journey, and parents therefore benefit and need a network of people who can offer practical help, emotional support, and a sense of belonging. Practical support doesn't have to be just childcare, both when the baby arrives or of your older children if you have them. It can be help with household chores, meal preparation, shopping, and running errands. This can be particularly important if you're struggling with pregnancy symptoms in the third trimester and in the postpartum period. Emotional support is also important as both pregnancy, as we've talked about today, and also transitioning to parenthood can be really emotionally demanding. Emotional support looks different for different people, as it can be physical touch, so a hug, validation, words of support, or advice. You may need different things at different times from different people, so perhaps start to think about this as we're reflecting on the importance of building your tribe or village today. So, in a recent study, it was found that social and emotional support was associated to lower levels of anxiety in women who were pregnant during the COVID lockdown, which really highlights the importance of this. So, this phrase, it takes a village to raise a parent, really encourages a shift in perspective, recognizing that we're not meant to navigate the challenges of pregnancy and parenthood in isolation, and that a supportive community is crucial for our well-being and the well-being of our children. So, who can be in our tribe and how do we build this? Your tribe is your circle of most trusted people, and this will look totally different for everyone. So, linking to the previous slide, we know that higher levels of social support act as protective factors for parents exposed to prenatal stress and is known to improve well-being both during and after pregnancy. For all of us, relationships and support systems can be really useful when experiencing stress. So we're hardwired for this. So you may be thinking, I've heard of all of this before, but what if I don't have a village? The reality to this is we know that we will also have differences in how much social support that we have available to us. So for some of you, it may be utilizing what support systems you do already have around you. And for others of you, it may be building systems or your own tribe. Sometimes those close connections you have with family and friends may be those most meaningful connections, which will really help activate your soothe system. However, sometimes it can be helpful to have someone outside of your usual network. Sometimes those close to us may also be in a very similar position, and those high levels of stress can make it hard to work out what support we may need. Whereas someone that's not in the same context may be able to help us identify what's happening and support us to get the help we need. So remember to hold in mind those brain changes we talked about earlier. Our brains are being wired differently during pregnancy, so spending time with people who build you up, don't drain you of energy, but are compassionate and understanding to your experience of pregnancy, probably a really high priority. So it's important to think about who that can be, who can that person be that can offer you that alternative support or perspective, and who can build up your battery rather than drain it. For those of you needing to build your tribe or add to your existing tribe, consider support groups, perhaps of other pregnant people or new parents. So we're going to signpost you to support groups towards the end of the workshop where you may be able to access more information or advice. Also may find informal support groups along the way. Some people find online communities helpful too, but just be mindful of the online safety and the risks of comparison online, which we know can often also be unhelpful. So, when thinking about friends and family offering support, we wanted to acknowledge that there has been a focus in recent years on fathers' mental health and levels of stress. We acknowledge that focusing on the father's experience may not feel relevant to everyone. So, if you're a single parent or in a same sex relationship, but we wanted to acknowledge this for those where it is because it helps to have that shared sense of responsibility. There also may be partners in the workshop today, but if you don't have anyone with you today, share this with them and let them know how they can help. It's been found that fathers are typically a major source of support for pregnant mothers as they influence their ability to cope with exhaustion and both the psychological and physical impact of pregnancy. Support from fathers can also reduce the likelihood of maternal postnatal depression. So their support is key. And if you're in a relationship, do lean on your partners for support. Um, Partners in the room, your support really matters. And again, find your tribe if you're a partner, or maybe your partner might need to find a tribe, a new tribe. It could be other fathers as well, which might help provide them with their support network so they can also support you. Consider whether professionals can form part of your tribe and support. That could be midwives, GP, or health visitor. If you've got hobbies, those who attend them with you and can be supportive in a less direct way. And again, perhaps others in your local community, such as neighbours, can also potentially be part of your tribe. So, do you have any tips, advice on building a tribe? If you don't have a tribe, it can feel really tough and isolating. So, what advice would you give to one another on this workshop, especially if you might be in this position to support others to build their tribe? So, joining a group, um, I know that when I was pregnant, I did the NCT group, and I it was really wonderful because there was a group of other moms going through similar experiences to me. We were all having that was on my first child, and after the baby was born, we used to organise meeting up together, and some of that was really helpful because it created a bit of a routine because a lot of my friends were not having babies and they were still working once I was off work. So during pregnancy, having created that network immediately gave me a group of people who were more available once my baby was born. So Try and put yourself out there. I found a parent friend at a parenting group once. I had my baby, but I wish I'd attended a class, maybe yoga. Yeah, that's what I mentioned earlier. Um, so doing that earlier um, is a good idea. Um, so asking friends for help and support, and I think quite often it can be really difficult to ask for help. And being clear with people what we need often really helps them to know how to help us. And we know that actually people really enjoy being asked to help others. Um, we can often struggle with that because it feels like a real imposition. Um, so speaking to your employer, I think that's really important because some of the pressures and stresses for maintaining that output can definitely come from your job. And you need your employer to also reduce expectations on what you can achieve as well as yourself. Um, Asking your partner for help if you have one. And again, I think being really clear about exactly what help you think will be helpful gives that person a clue how they can support you. Great, thank you. They're great tips. And then that's a really important question. We're very near the end. I know we've run over slightly in time. What do you need from your family and friends and professionals who are in your tribe? And maybe articulating that now will be helpful in terms of thinking about what you might ask for from them when you're being asking for that help. So sometimes it's just a sounding board. And I think sometimes we need to let people know that. I don't need you to solve the problem, I just need you to listen. Um, and I think that can be really helpful with partners too, who might be trying to feel that they've got to solve the problem rather than just listen and validate your experience. So asking for some practical support, um, feeling understood, and others around you may be having realistic expectations. I think it can be really difficult, particularly in the earlier stages of pregnancy where you're not so visibly pregnant, for people to really just understand how demanding the pregnancy is on your body and mind. Great, that's really helpful. So, messages we got from other parents to you as parents to be, don't be afraid to ask for help. It doesn't make you a bad mom, it makes you a good one. Realizing you need help and doing something about it means you care and want the best for you and your baby. And that is a pretty amazing thing. For me, it was about understanding before I gave birth about the changes that would happen in my body and how this would make me feel. I felt a bit prepared. Go easy on yourself. Being pregnant can be hard for some people. Don't compare yourself to others. We all have our own challenges, and that's okay. And these are quotes from new parents that have used maternity services across Suffolk and North East Essex around well-being and helpful advice that they thought might be useful to share with you. So the take-home messages from today, and we know we've shared a lot with you today. Um, But these are what we're hoping will be your take-home messages. So stress is a normal experience during pregnancy, so you're not alone if you're feeling stressed. Remember that you can do what you can, but there are things outside of your control. Your body and brain are doing the most amazing things to prepare you for parenthood. So, building self compassion and slowing down can help to reduce the impact this has on your stress levels. It's actually really important because actually some of the changes you're experiencing are there to prepare you for parenthood. So, it's almost like embracing some of that will mean that transition to parenthood might not be so challenging. Give yourself permission to prioritize the basics for nutrition, sleep, and physical activity. Again, small changes can make a huge difference. It's not in our biology to do this alone, and I think really hold on to this as you go into parenthood. It's one of the most important things I've had to learn as a parent. Use and build your tribe and give yourself permission to ask for help. Let people in your tribe know how they can help you. Now we're just going to move on to some of the additional support that is available out there. And I think I'm going to hand this back to Kelsey now.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Beth. And as Beth said, thank you for bearing with us. We still will have some time for the Q&A but we just wanted to briefly signpost you to some resources and then do our final Slidos, and we'll come to that. So do post any questions that you might have in the Q&A function on Slido, which hopefully everyone should be able to access. Um, so yeah, we hope that today has given you some ideas of ways that you can support yourself when you're feeling stressed and really highlighted the importance of that support network around you. But we recognise that some of you may feel that you need some additional support with managing stress and your mental health, and there is support out there. So as we've said, pregnancy is really tough at times, and actually recognising and reaching out for additional support is the best step you can take if you're sort of recognising that you need more help and support. So this slide is all about that. Places you can go, people you can speak to get the support that you might need. And these are based in services in Suffolk, Norfolk and North East Essex, as that's where our team is kind of based. But do speak to your healthcare providers if you don't live in those areas about what's available to you. So speaking to midwives, GPs and health visitors, because they should be able to signpost you and refer you to appropriate services. If you live in, as I said, those three areas, you can also self-refer to access talking therapies via the NHS. And these are services which offer you mental health support if you're an expectant or a new parent as well. So do bear this in mind as well once you've had your baby. So you've got wellbeing, which is in Suffolk, links on the slide there, talking therapies in Norfolk, or therapy for you, which is South and North East Essex. There are also community perinatal mental health teams as well, and these are services for people who are planning to become parents in the future or who are pregnant and either have a history of or who are experiencing moderate to some more severe end of mental health issues. And referrals to these services can be made by a healthcare professional who knows you well, and the referral forms for those are on the slide there. Also added the Mind Mental Health charity, which has some wonderful resources. There's a Minds Matter course from Suffolk Mind as well, and that's online. So do look at the link if you're interested, and if you're perhaps suffering from things such as worrying thoughts, anxiety, or postnatal depression once you've had your baby. Pandas Foundation is also for postnatal depression support. There's perinatal compassion focused therapy books, and also one around maternal anxiety and also eating disorder support from Wednesday's Child. The next few slides I won't talk to in loads of detail, but just a range of resources around different areas. So yeah, in the interest of time, we won't talk to all of them, but there's some interesting resources here around building your tribe, so support groups and networking, and different areas and different things that they offer. There's also one on online support. If we go to the next slide, please, Beth. Great. So yeah, if online support would be better, we've got Facebook groups, for example, and different apps as well that could support you. Financial and housing supports on the next slide. So thinking about your local councils, citizens advice, as well as others as well. Healthy Start is also a great one, and one that Beth mentioned earlier, thinking about resources that they offer to pregnant people. We've also collated some resources around fear of childbirth, which is called more formally tocophobia. Again, if this applies to you, but speak again to your midwife, GP, on health visitors if this is something that you're experiencing. And then finally, domestic violence. So we've collated some really key resources there if this is something that you're experiencing. And please do reach out for support. So we've got the Phoebe Centre in Ipswich, Women's Aid, which offers support online or over the telephone. We've got one in Suffolk, Suffolk Domestic Abuse Helpline. Another one in Ipswich, Lighthouse Women's Aid has a whole range of services and support. Leeway, which is in Norfolk, as well as Wellbeing and Barnardo's as well. Okay, and then finally, I won't go into loads of detail about this because Beth's already helpfully discussed this with you, but on Tuesday, the 4th of November at 12 o'clock again, we are doing a second Parent to Be workshop around how to support your nutrition during pregnancy. And it will work very much in the same way as this workshop today. So you just use the link on the screen there, or if you've followed us on Eventbrite, hopefully you'll already know this, so you sign up in the same way. We'll just go to the final slide, which is around feedback. So as we said, we really appreciate any feedback you can give us. So if you could use the link when you get the slides or the QR code and just complete the longer feedback form, it doesn't take too long. That would be really, really appreciated.